Utica, right past Albuquerque.
Hey! Happy Pride!
Happy Pride! I'm so happy you got to join us for this.
Of course. What am I doing here, though?
So, you know how we have those trails in Connecticut?
Right, like the wine trail, the pizza trail.
Exactly. So, come to find out, I'm not arguing that those aren't important to our history.
Sure.
But Connecticut actually has a long and rich queer history, and I figured why not take advantage of that and go on a trail of our own?
Ooh, like Connecticut's Rainbow Trail.
Exactly. So I figured we can just do this ourselves and get going.
Are we using that, though, a 1992 map of California?
You know, I thought it was really pretty, but no, just for the bit. So let's get going.
So where are we going?
We're gonna have to go back in time just a little bit.
How far back in time?
I would say about 100 years or so.
That's pretty far.
Tucked away in the wilds of Connecticut, you'll find this building right here in East Haddam, the Palmer Warner Home. It was built as a sanctuary for the LGBTQ+ community and an oasis made by Frederick Palmer and Harold Metzger over the course of decades, and stands now with a mission that's been preserved and carries on to this day.
He loved him deeply and just never really wanted to change how things were in the house.
It's almost a spitting image of the way things were all those years ago.
They're on the mantle, they're, just spread all around.
As the United States re-elected Franklin D. Roosevelt as president in 1936, architect Frederick Palmer and his mother bought this home, with the sole purpose to eventually transform it into a museum for Connecticut.
This is Frederick on the beach in his long pants.
But according to Lynette Fisher, site admin for the Palmer Warner House, it soon became so much more once friends introduced Palmer to Howard Metzger, and the two fell in love.
They hit it off. They had many things in common. One of them was gardening, another was cars. Because their car enthusiasm, every time they got a new car, they would just cut a new bay in. And so it disrupted the integrity of the barn.
The relationship would continue to develop over the years, but you wouldn't have seen it from the outside. The two were rather private people, according to Fisher. Metzger moved into the home after Palmer's mother passed away, and the two would have to get creative when Howard was off with the Merchant Marines.
Their only way of communication was through phone calls when he was on leave or letters, and so there had to be some coded language.
And whether it was the product of time or just location, the two wanted to create a community for people like them.
In the in-between time, it was a spare bedroom where guests from out of town were invited to stay for as long as they wanted.
The two opened up their East Haddam home where LGBTQ+ people could come and take advantage of the private landscape the area had to offer.
We have diaries and writings in his diary where people have stayed for 6 months.
Do you feel like the story at this house should be more well known at this point?
Yeah, when you're so far away from cities and places where you can find a resource and a network, it becomes so much more important to create a bigger network in a rural community.
That sanctuary lives on as a home to elevate local voices who may not always be heard, and highlight the communication between other LGBTQ+ couples in the new Letters Through Unity exhibit, just like Metzger and Palmer did all those years ago.
We find ways to communicate even when sometimes it's difficult. This is an important story to be told. I think this is a place where people can come and be reflective and celebratory and feel safe.
Wow, that was a really beautiful story, Stefan.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we talk about LGBTQ+ history, sometimes we forget that the community has really existed a long time before even the events of Stonewall or the AIDS crisis.
That actually gives me an idea of where we could go next. Hand over the keys.
Oh, that was demanding.
I'm driving.
Okay. I gotta hand it to you. That was fast. That was really fast.
Welcome to Central Connecticut State University, Stefan.
You know, I love this. Why are we here, though?
Well, this school is home to the LGBTQ+ Center and Archive.
Oh, so this is where they keep the history and stuff.
Some of it, yeah. Do you want to go check it out?
Obviously.
Let's go.
When you think of a library, you think of books, but an archive like the LGBTQ Center at Central Connecticut State University is more than that. It's boxes and boxes of history waiting to be discovered.
Primary sources are the records or papers of organizations and individuals. And to use this material to write a book, you need some primary resources. So authors reach out to the archival collections.
It's notes or official documents, but it's also buttons or t-shirts, all telling the story of the fight for rights and recognition.
I'm going to use the word fight for the rights of, underprivileged, underrepresented groups like gay, lesbian, transgender, queer. And, people want to know what was happening in Connecticut at a certain time.
Author and CCSU Professor William Mann sees the work as more important than ever.
Those of us who've been working in this field for many years had to fight to find this history and to record it and to preserve it. And there's attempts right now to erase some of this history, or at least to put it behind us, to not talk about it anymore, but all the more reasons to talk about it. The people who keep this history are heroes.
It's a printed handbill, probably copied for pennies at a copy shop and distributed to people as they walk by. But to the staff at the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History, it's a breadcrumb, a moment in time that tells us a story, leading to chapters we don't even know yet. The flyer announces the return of drag shows at a club in West Hartford, nearly 50 years ago, with the hand-lettered, "We're back to stay."
We know members of the LGBTQ community have always been in Connecticut, but it's been hard to document that history through the objects in our collection because it was either not left behind in concrete ways, so we have to kind of read between the lines to see how those people were in the community and how they fit into the community.
What the museum is looking for is more context. What were the shows like? Who performed? All pieces of a puzzle that makes up LGBTQ life before being documented on social media. The collection also contains a likely love story. After the Civil War, Addie Brown wrote to Rebecca Primus. Both women were African American, and by today's measure, the two were expressing romantic feelings.
So they write back and forth to each other, very intimate letters, very, by today's language, you would assume they were a couple, but we do not know that for sure. We don't have any concrete evidence that that was the fact. All we have are these one-sided letters from one woman to another.
To some, the collections offer a connection to the past and to people just like themselves.
My students actually call them their queer ancestors, because sometimes their own families aren't available to them. Their own families have rejected them. But then they learn about Marsha P. Johnson or Harvey Milk or James Baldwin, and they say, oh, I do have a family. These are people who fought for me before I was born.
With the papers of Jerry Marie Leisengang, who championed transgender rights for decades here in Connecticut until her death in 2020, students can examine the actual documents for greater context and accuracy.
Her papers are remarkable because they stretch back into the 1980s, a time when people weren't talking about transgender issues.
When we educate others, when we share the personal struggles, we are really opening avenue to understanding. We are not being afraid from the others. And people have different opinions, might agree or disagree with certain groups and their beliefs, but at least those archives gives a chance to understand, to see what people are coming from.
In New Britain, Doug Stewart, Fox 61.
So, what'd you think?
I loved it. I was more so fascinated, though, with the fact that we were in two places at once.
Well, Stefan, that's the magic of Pride.
That is the magic. And I know we've spent a lot of time so far talking about LGBTQ plus history and how it was more than just the HIV crisis in the 80s, but looking back at that time period, was a very important time for us.
Well, history is as much about the struggles as it is about the triumphs. So many people died during that crisis, but a lot of people came out the other side as well. Do you want to go meet some of them?
I think that would be a great idea.
Rare cancer seen in 41 homosexuals, read the headline. 41 cases in New York and California, with 8 of them dying in less than 2 years after diagnosis. What followed for many was nothing less than an explosion in their lives. Some survived, some didn't. Some retreated, some fought back.
When I was in medical school back at the University of Miami, and we realized that something was going on around 1981. We didn't know it was a virus, but being that I was a young medical student at that time, I was visiting the floors. I had just come out myself, being a gay man, in 1980. And so I was attracted to the medical floors to see what was going on to members of my own community.
So it was 1983. I was down in New Haven, blithely studying, and there was something on a telephone pole, which it didn't even register. And then I was looking for what was called work study, and somebody said, oh, you should volunteer at a new organization called AIDS Project New Haven.
And I don't think I heard about AIDS until maybe 85. I think there was something on the West Coast, something that was happening, something that possibly could be happening to gay men.
I got a call from my dear friend Warren, who had moved to St. Petersburg after living in Hartford. And he was in the hospital in St. Pete. In 2 days, he called me up and said, I want you to come down and see me. Right. And there was a little desperation in his voice. And I made a plane reservation to go to St. Pete. And he died before I got to go to the hospital that morning.
Unique populations, back in those days, it was called the 4-H Club. You know, we always have to have acronyms for everything, right? So the 4-H Club was homosexuals, heroin users, hemophiliacs, and Haitians. And remember, I was down in Miami, so we saw a lot of Haitians coming in with this unknown disease at that time.
But it was all very grassroots and very nascent, barely organized, but a lot of passion, a lot of concern, because obviously our brothers were dying around us.
When it got really bad, I remember just seeing people and this knowing, because there was a look. And the look was, it was scary, but it was also like heartbreaking, because people had to go about their lives.
There was a lot of uncertainty. There were no drugs. People basically were learning about their diagnosis on Monday, and some of them were dead by Friday, others maybe a month, 2 months. But there was a weird combination of hopelessness and empowerment, because we knew that the only ones who were going to take care of our community were ourselves.
You know, being black and gay is very different. Well, you know, I only know one way of being gay is being black and gay, but there was also a whole thing about, there were many men whose family found out that they were sick or that they were gay only when they found out that they had AIDS.
God bless the lesbians, because they've always been take charge. It wasn't about them, but it was about their brothers in the LGBTQIA community. And so yeah, we definitely needed their support, their encouragement, their love, their hugs.
Luck is such a cheap word, but why them, not me type of thing. So and not that I live with that, but I'm not going to forget those people who passed away. They all had lives, and I always believe that even though people have passed, if you see their name or if you say their name, they're alive inside of you.
It wasn't easy. We were threading a very delicate needle of being politic, but pushing, having our voices heard, but not wanting to offend anyone who had the purse strings. Yeah, and it's still the case today, right?
Well, now their funds are all cut. And so, you know, the ramifications of it just snowball so far. And it affects my relationship, you know, our relationship with IAPAC, IAPAC's relationship with UNAIDS. Everything has been put in jeopardy as a result of this. And if we don't end the stigma and discrimination, we're just going to see HIV cases rising, not just staying at 38,000, but now rising. So it affects everybody in that way. If you cut all these efforts, we've made some great strides. We have a ton more to make if we're ever going to end HIV by 2030. Forget about that 2030 date now.
And I happened to look over, and there he was, the man himself, Keith Haring. I bought this big Free South Africa poster. He signed that. People like that I just, you know, I would love to just see who they transitioned into, who they became. I know he would probably be doing movies.
When I go out to gay men's events, I see these other guys in their 60s and 70s, and we can reminisce and take joy in the fact that we're still here.
Doug Stewart, Fox 61.
Wow, those were some pretty moving stories. And I will say, though, that the 1980s were not really that long ago, if you think about it. I mean, sure, we weren't alive back then, but for some people, the 1980s, they were almost like yesterday.
Absolutely. You know what really does feel like it was just yesterday? Marriage equality. It's only been legal here in Connecticut since 2008.
That actually brings up a conversation I was having with one of our coworkers, Kay Pattyfoot. Come to find out, her teacher in West Hartford were one of the first people to get married under that law. And in fact, she unfortunately passed away a little earlier this year, but Kay had the opportunity to speak with some of her friends and her family just about the impact she made.
So many people knew Dr. Tracy Wilson as an activist, a historian, and a trailblazer. But for others, including me, she was my high school history teacher and a significant role model. I spoke with people who knew her well, and they're choosing to share those stories and special memories they'll remember most about her. Dr. Tracy Wilson was many things, but her wife, Beth Bai, says she really cared about other people, and that's something she'll miss.
She was so kind to people and calm and accepting. That wasn't just her as a teacher, that was her as a mother and a wife and a grandmother. And I think, you know, I think we'll all miss her questions, because she was genuinely interested in you.
Former colleagues are remembering their coworker turned mentor. West Hartford Superintendent Paul Vicina says he'll never forget how she created a course geared to African American history.
She wrote the curriculum for her. She taught in 10th grade with the full intent that these would be students that she could mentor, that she could inspire, who would then go on to take the AP course, most likely in their 12th grade year.
State Representative Tammy Exum looked back on a time when she wanted her son to take that same class.
I went to her and I said, I don't know, you know, would this be a good class placement for him? Because I think it was at that time maybe an AP class, and it would have been his first. And she said, oh, there's not a student who wants to learn that I can't teach.
Wilson and Bai were the first same-sex couple to be legally married in the state of Connecticut when same-sex marriage was legalized in 2008. Dr. Wilson taught at Conard High School for more than 30 years, and teachers like Steve Bassey and Sean O'Connor say they were always blown away by her.
Tracy was probably the most knowledgeable person I've ever met. Yet she was always the first person to ask a question.
She became almost more motivated to both understand history, but also to give a voice to voiceless people.
She'll be most remembered by those who loved her as a go-getter, an activist, and a leader.
She believed that you had to participate and you had to, you know, it's not always pretty. Sometimes you disagree with people you really like and you have to push.
In West Hartford, Kay Pattyfoot, Fox 61.
Across the country, there's an estimated 1.4 million LGBTQ plus owned businesses. And there's no shortage of them right here in Connecticut. I mean, you have Strangeways in New Haven, you have Molten Java out in Bethel. And right here in Granby, you have this location of Julian's Farm Store. It's only been open for a few years, but it's captured the love of the entire community with their flavors and built a bridge between people with their food.
The sounds of birds mixed in with bakers, That'll take you deep into the woods of Connecticut, where only one question remains.
What do we want?
Sweet or savory?
I'm gonna do a piece of the bacon onion quiche.
You really can't go wrong at Julian's farm store.
We're gonna get that one.
Husbands Christopher and Julian have steered this ship since 2023. The two originally met in London, where they fell in love, and later moved here to Granby, to the same farm that Christopher worked at back in 1999.
I don't even know that there was an expectation. I think it was a little bit of a dream and a little bit of a let's see what happens.
I started making a few baked goods like cinnamon rolls and donuts, and then people's response was immediate and amazing. So yeah, it became increasingly busier, and here we are.
Long lines and laughter continue into the vegetable garden outside that Julian manages himself. Collected around tables, big and small, a community was built in what almost appears to be something out of a storybook.
This to me feels like a magical little pocket of Connecticut where you really can't find anything else like it.
We have a lot to be grateful for in Granby, but Julian's is right at the top of that list. People come not just from all across Granby, but from across the region, from across the state. We're very, very proud of these guys.
It's a pride that has welcomed the couple in with open arms, from customers with a variety of beliefs. And especially in a time of divisive political turnover, Christopher and Julian say they refuse to let fear rule how they operate.
We got 6.
Because this farm store is proof that living authentically is a testament to what you can bring to your community.
This is very much of this place, as are we. Food is a way of bringing people together and not even talking about it, not leading with politics.
Well, everybody's been here, like Republicans, Democrats.
Yeah, they're all here.
The whole spectrum. These are the kind of people who walk through these doors, and everybody's just being amazing.
I think when everybody at the same time is eating this food and enjoying and receiving this love, really, that's a powerful thing.
Hey, I'm
Where have you been?
So last story you saw, I was in Granby at a bakery. Yeah, I got a little hungry. I wanted some baked goods, and I stopped for a snack, I will say.
And you didn't bring me any?
So I was very hungry, and I did think about bringing you some. I just ate them all. Look where we are. Oh my God, distraction.
This is the Shea here in Hartford, and it's one of Connecticut's awesome LGBTQ+ bars and restaurants, and it's actually one of the ones that's been open the longest, almost 50 years here in the state.
And perhaps it also has to do with our next story, which is on the very long and important history of the Connecticut drag scene.
While Paris was burning, Hartford sizzled.
Over the decades, Dr. Richard Stilson has made Connecticut their home, both as a therapist and as Mucha Mucha, the mother and grandmother of the House of Pleasure drag family, a matriarch who guides and mentors drag newcomers.
I'm the one that gives birth to the kids, gives them their names, and then we guide them in the process of what it's like to walk the runway and dress for what the category calls for.
Mucha came to be in the 90s after Stilson met their drag mother as a student while at UConn. That's her in the Marie Antoinette wig, right there, Vincenza Placet.
She came in and she wasn't in drag, but you just kind of felt her presence.
For decades, drag in Connecticut was an underground art, kept away from people's eyes, even their own family. The 70s is when everything changed, after the State Liquor Commission attempted to shut down West Hartford's Finocchio Bar.
That brought drag into the political scene, if you will, and it was the UConn Law Department that took on that case and helped to overturn that.
From there, drag queens and kings continued to find their homes on stage in Connecticut clubs, and slowly became more public in the coming decades. From pride celebrations to television shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, which premiered back in 2009. Several Connecticut queens have appeared on the show. Season 9 winner Sasha Velour lived in New Haven growing up, but later moved to Brooklyn before they appeared on the show. Season 15, however, was when Connecticut drag truly shined, as Robin Fierce, Amethyst, and Lucy LaDuca made their international debut.
You guys were the nation's first look into Connecticut drag. What was that like?
It was an honor to represent
Connecticut drag at RuPaul's Drag Race. There had never been anybody from Connecticut on Drag Race before. And so then when 3 of us got on, we were like, what is It's like that scene in Spider-Man where they're all like looking at each other. And so to be able to be there with them and represent the Connecticut drag scene really meant a lot.
And while the show has helped LaDuca travel the world, the Connecticut native always finds her way back to where it all started. Because simply, it's home.
I love it here. Could I move to New York or LA? Sure. But I don't like them enough to want to live there. Here, I get to be close to my family. I get to focus on projects here. And I get to still be a part of the Connecticut drag scene, which is thriving, by the way.
A symbol of resilience and the fight at the heart of Pride, according to LaDuca. Especially as some corporate sponsors pull their funding from celebrations across the country. It's the continued push drag performers make, LaDuca says, that can make all the difference here in Connecticut.
It's my belief that every single Pride celebration saves lives. Unfortunately, some people have an issue with that. And the thing is, we're not trying to indoctrinate anyone. We're just trying to teach kids that it's okay to be who they are and that there is a huge community for them when they get to that age. I grew up in Ansonia, very, very small town here in Connecticut, and I get messages from young queer people just saying that seeing where I have gone from that small town makes them feel seen and makes them feel like their life is worth living. And that's like the most incredible thing.
So now what are you doing, Stefan?
Okay, Emma, hear me out. We've already talked a lot about LGBTQ plus history here in Connecticut, so I figured now would be a very good time to talk about where we are moving forward.
And you thought you'd do that by ditching the car and going for a run?
Oh, 100%. Actually, next story we have is about this runner we have in Connecticut. They are trying to make racing out here more inclusive for everyone. So I figured let's get in on the art and really put our pedal to the metal, or my feet to the concrete. Let's go.
In rural Lebanon,
On your mark,
it's another race
get set,
and another town
go!
for one running club in Connecticut.
Good cause, lots of friends, just getting out here and running.
Jean Hoffman is among hundreds of runners part of the Run 169 Town Society, which shares a common goal: to run a road race in all 169 towns in Connecticut. But it turns out Hoffman already crossed that finish line.
So I am currently in round 2. So I've done all the towns and now I'm repeating them all.
There's a new challenge and common goal Hoffman has stepped up to.
My goal was to try to get as many races to either have a non-binary option or at least have a prefer not to say, so people were not restricted to the binary of male or female.
Jean identifies as non-binary, which means they don't identify their gender as male or female.
There is no one way to be non-binary. There is no one way to dress, one way to talk. Everyone is individual.
Hoffman said they've enjoyed running as a hobby and social activity for nearly a decade, but hadn't always been able to run as themselves.
I had not really put a name to my identity. I had kind of gone with the mainstream of I was born a female, and so I must check off female.
The Hartford Marathon Foundation then introduced the non-binary division in 2022. After Hoffman signed up in that division for the first time, it forever changed their view of the registration form.
And as I learned more about other, quote, options, and I learned more about myself, I decided that I preferred to be in a non-binary category.
Now, Hoffman wears their identity on their sleeve and head to toe. The Hartford Marathon Foundation told Fox 61 that it has received positive feedback for making the non-binary division available in its races the past few years.
It feels good to make a difference and to know that I'm potentially helping future generations be able to participate, be able to feel comfortable with who they are.
The race in Lebanon was organized by a different running event group, O2 Event Productions. Race director Charlie Olbrias offers opportunities to let various groups shine at each event he presents.
Races that I put on, we always make sure that we give them the option to register as non-binary or not, prefer not to say.
In Olbrias' experience, adding extra recognitions and awards doesn't take much out of the budget or planning, and he encourages other race directors to follow suit.
It doesn't matter who you are, you should be included. And one of the beautiful things about running is it's such an inclusive community, and I like to put that forward with our races.
This race is awesome. The race director keeps adding categories as more and more people participate. A lot of other races have been a little slow to get on board, and are getting on board.
The road race proceeds benefited Bailey's Garden, which is a boundless playground for kids of all abilities, showing people from a young age that anyone can feel included, no matter who they are. In Lebanon, Leah Myers, Fox 61.
Wow, you made surprisingly good time.
Yeah, I nearly twisted my ankle right there. I think I got a few more races before I can catch up to Jean.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thanks. What are we doing here?
Well, the state capitol is where history is made, Stefan, from activism to debates, floor speeches, and even the process of how we create new laws for Connecticut. And some of those new laws have expanded rights for LGBTQ+ people here. And I actually thought we could take a look and meet some of the LGBTQ+ people themselves who are doing that work right now in politics and see how it all gets done.
I've always known that I wanted to do something that could help people. It's not an office that often gets talked about. I think there is this huge opportunity to do really good work that has a huge impact on the state.
When Connecticut State Treasurer Eric Russell won his race in 2022, he became the first black out LGBTQ+ person in American history elected to statewide office.
It was shocking in many ways, one, because with all of the progress that we have made, I'm surprised that it had not happened earlier. It also came, in my mind, with a big sense of responsibility, right? To make sure that you're doing the work well, right? And that you understand you're representing a community that's much broader than yourself.
He's now one of 18 total LGBTQ+ elected officials in Connecticut.
With that, I think, comes the responsibility now to make sure that other people can see themselves reflected in me as well, and know that there are opportunities for people to do whatever they can set their mind to.
And while he's not defined by his sexuality, it's an important part of who he is.
I came out in 2011 after I met my now husband, and so it was kind of a journey that we went on together in coming out. It's a challenging thing kind of to go through that process, but it was ultimately was awesome, and I was very much supported, and there are still really challenging aspects of being your authentic self.
A feeling Darien Deputy Democratic Registrar Corey Freight shares.
As someone who grew up unsure of myself, unsure of my place in town, never quite feeling like I fit in, I realized it wasn't just because I didn't play lacrosse. There was something else there.
He came out as bisexual during the COVID-19 pandemic.
It wasn't safe to continue hiding who I was to myself, to my family, to my friends. To not live authentically is such a weight on the soul. I'm really grateful that I get to unburden myself of that weight, that so many people that I know in my life help me lift that weight off.
Freight also works with the Leonard Litz Foundation and other local LGBTQ+ nonprofits and says Pride is more than just the month of June.
Pride is 365. We're big proponents of that at work, and we believe that every day is a chance to make the community better.
But he and Russell fear Pride and LGBTQ+ people are under attack.
The Office of the Presidency, all of our federal institutions and governing bodies and political parties all have to serve the entire country. They're elected to serve. And President Trump is president for all Americans, whether they voted for him or not. He has a responsibility in that office to choose kindness at every turn.
The American Civil Liberties Union is tracking nearly 600 anti-LGBTQ+ bills across the U.S. this year. 11 of those are right here in Connecticut.
We're very fortunate in Connecticut, and it's because we've done the work to make sure that everyone in our state, regardless of who you are, that you know you're supported, and that the government here in Connecticut is going to treat you and see you and celebrate you for who you are. Those rights are very much under attack now, and we can't take any of this progress that we've made for granted.
While both these men are Democrats, they believe LGBTQ+ rights shouldn't be tied up in party politics.
Bipartisanship is super important, not just because it has bi in it during Pride, but it matters because it shows the residents of our state that we are united in something, that we're standing together. And it's permission for people up and down the political ladder to show that support, to be brave, to put their voice out there and say, I'm going to stand by the entire community. And I hope the leaders down in DC will take heed. I hope that they will listen to their colleagues from the great state of Connecticut and hear how we do things here.
As Russell and Freight's work continues far beyond June, they hope young people remember.
So many people say, I don't care about politics, and the response is always, politics cares about you. Whether you are getting there in the voting booth or getting out in the streets, change is still happening. It's easy to sit aside and do nothing, but sometimes it's really hard to live with the consequences of that. The best thing to do is to feel like you gave it your all, to try and make the change that you want to see, no matter what that change is.
It gets better, and I know it seems really difficult as you're navigating this process of figuring out who you are and getting comfortable with being your authentic self. Whatever differences make us up, you want someone to be able to see the humanity in you. Navigating this process and figuring out who you are can be a really beautiful thing as you go through it. But it's really important for people to know that they have a community around them that's going to support them.
So, Emma, now that we're at the end of everything, I'm dying to know, what did you think?
That was so much fun, Stefan. I really enjoyed getting to see all of the incredible history right here in our backyard. Thank you so much for inviting me and our viewers along for the ride.
You know, I was just really happy to have you join us here on Connecticut's Rainbow Trail.
You can watch more coverage of Pride on Fox 61 Plus, of course, as well as all of our regular news, sports, and weather coverage. For Fox 61, I'm Emma Wolforst.
And I'm Stefan Reels.
Happy Pride!
You know, we should do this again. Where's that map?